Once again, happy Friday. Let's get started like we normally do. Short period of bell meditation. Wherever you are behind your avatar, just get into a nice meditation posture. And as I ring the ching bell here in the virtual world of Second Life, I just want you to focus on the sound. Really focus on the sound of the bell. Get that deep listening going. Get ready to absorb some Dharma. You're probably going to get distracted. It happens to all of us. When it does, just gently remind yourself and go back to focusing on the sound of the bell. So short meditation, 3 recitations, and on with the talk for today. Give you a moment, get into a nice posture, and we'll begin at the sound of the bell. I go for refuge to the Buddha, the teacher. I go for refuge to the Dhamma, the teaching. I go for refuge to the Sangha, the taught. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dhamma. I take refuge in the Sangha. I have taken refuge in the Buddha. I have taken refuge in the Dhamma. I have taken refuge in the Sangha. 3 pure precepts. Cease to do harm. Do only good. Do good for others. Bodhisattva vow. However innumerable all beings are, I vow to lead them all. However inexhaustible my delusions are, I vow to extinguish them all. However immeasurable the Dharma teachings are, I vow to master them all. However endless the Buddha's way is, I vow to follow it completely. Swaha. Okay, so you've already probably seen the title of this one on the notice. It said Sentient or Living and a question mark. So that's where we're starting at today. Excuse me. Sentience. What is it? Well, this was a question that was posed by a Sangha member at last Friday's session, and they know who they are, and you guys, some of you do too. And I just want to say something about asking questions like that. That's a good thing. Not only can it get you answers, right, which are valuable, we've talked about that before, but the other thing that it does is, the teacher normally spends some time getting stuff together, for Dharma talks and kind of get a pattern maybe or something going where we can learn. And sometimes we forget things, right? Things slip by that could be important in how we engage our practice. This is one of those cases because I had already dealt with sentience in my own practice, this idea. Well, it kind of fell by the wayside when it came to what I was getting ready to talk to you guys about. So I'm very happy it got brought up. And so what I did, I kind of pushed everything else back a week and I slipped this talk in there for today. So to the person that asked the question, and there was more than one, thank you. Because this is a really good question for a Buddhist to contemplate. Sentience, what is it? But we got to have a follow-up question. Ready. And that follow-up question is, sentience, how does it relate to my practice? So, two good questions. Sentience, what is it? Sentience, how does it relate to my practice? So it's been, like I said, it's been some time since I thought about this whole sentience idea. So the question kind of caught me by surprise, and I apologize today for not giving a clearer answer. That's what we're going to work on today. So the causal consequence of this question being asked ended up me spending some time during the Labor Day weekend kind of contemplating it over again. Because in my practice, sentience isn't the deciding factor in how to treat another living creature. I make the choice that in my practice, the focus is not on sentience. I choose to honor all life. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Sentience, what is it? Well, let's start with contemporary definitions, because those are the ones that mean something to us. So I picked a few out. Let's start with the Cambridge Dictionary. Always a good place to start. This one is, the definition they give of sentient or sentience is able to experience feelings. That's how they describe it. First question for me with that particular definition is, do you mean physical feelings or emotional feelings? Which do you mean, or do you mean both? Because all living beings exhibit an ability to feel physically. So if you poke a paramecium with a needle, it reacts. But if you poke a moose with a needle, it also reacts. So do all living beings then, they exhibit movement, or what they want to call it, reaction when there's pain, stimulation. But do they do the same thing emotionally? Do all living beings exhibit the same way emotionally? Like insult a paramecium's haircut or a moose's, and they don't respond. So that's one definition, and that's issues that I can see within those definitions when we're speaking of it from a Buddhist perspective. Merriam-Webster Dictionary. Probably all of us at least had that on our desk at one point or another. They give the definition of, again, of sentience, responsive to or conscious of sense impressions, aware, finely sensitive in perception or feeling. So it's a little more complicated definition, if you will. But they're the same question. Both the paramecium and the moose do exhibit awareness. So I guess that means they're sentient by this definition. But finally sensitive, what does that mean? That seems very subjective. And perception and feeling, well, these are kind of wholly different functions of the body-mind. So we need to expand that definition, maybe look deeper into it. Then I found this one. This is a website. It's called sentientmedia.org, and they just call themselves Sentient Media. want to go ahead and put that up in case you're interested in going to that one. And in there I found this article from April 8th of this year, 2020, by a Dr. Jane Kotzman. And this site, by the way, is geared toward animal ethics and also climate issues. So they have their own view, right? Just like we do as Buddhists. So their definition of sentient is an adjective that describes a capacity for feeling. The word sentient derives from the Latin verb sentare, which means to feel. The first letters, sen, match the beginnings of common English words including sentiment, sensory, and sensation, all of which give hints to the meaning of the term. In dictionary definitions, sentience is defined as able to experience feelings, responsive to or conscious of sense impressions, and capable of feeling things through physical senses. Sentient beings experience wanted emotions like happiness, joy, and gratitude, and unwanted emotions in the form of pain, suffering, and grief. The agreed circle of sentience has expanded to include vertebrate animals, creatures with spines, and in particular, parrots, dogs, pigs, cows, other farmed animals, and other companion animals. Studies of non-vertebrate animals, including octopus, squid, and cuttlefish, and decapod crustaceans like shrimp and lobsters and crayfish, they indicate that they too are probably sentient. Scientists have not yet conclusively determined whether spiders, other insects, and gastropods like slugs and snails are sentient. So they got into a lot of definition there. And again, remember, they're coming from the animal rights and climate issue view. So again, here they use the term capacity for feeling. But it seems that they've made, in this particular case, they've made it synonymous with emotions. Now, rightly or not so rightly, depending on your view, anthropomorphizing them is done in the hopes of making them less likely to be injured or killed. And that's their goal. It's not a bad goal. But again, their definition of sentience is wrapped around their view. Then I found this one, because once they talked about bugs and invertebrates, if you will, I thought I should go out and find some research on that, and I found that at sentienceresearch.org. This is an article that was a gentleman, Jonathan Birch. This was in August of this year, 2020. And this is what he says about invertebrate consciousness. There is no agreement on whether any invertebrates are conscious, and no agreement on a methodology that could settle the issue. So stopping right there, that kind of puts it into our metaphysical category, if you will. So there is no reason to suppose that only a human-like central nervous system will give rise to consciousness, and a great deal of evidence that very different types of animals are conscious. An example is bird brains, which have many structural similarities to mammalian brains, but different arrangements of neurons. Yet their brain circuits seem to be wired in a different way that creates a similar effect in terms of consciousness and cognition. An octopus is an invertebrate with a very different type of nervous system, but an octopus exhibits behavior and responds to their environment like a conscious being. So here's some folks doing invertebrate research into consciousness. This is how they see sentience in invertebrates. It'd be kind of hard to disagree that all living things experience physical pain. I think we can say that's got to be true, whether it's a cricket or a cow. The doubt, though, for some, is whether they feel emotional pain. Should that even matter? So these are, let's call them secular definitions of sentience. Looked around for some more Buddhist-themed definition of sentience, and this is what I came across. This is actually a website that I go to pretty often, actually. Here it is right here. This is the Chinese Buddhism Encyclopedia. You can find a lot of good information there on Chinese Buddhism. They have a thing, sentient beings, and here's their definition. All inhabitants of the three realms of samsara who possess a mind and transmigrate within the 6 classes of beings. Animate things, such as plants, which do not have a mind, are not sentient. Any being who possesses a mind that is contaminated by delusions or their imprints, both sentient being and living being are terms used to distinguish beings whose minds are contaminated by either of these 2 obstructions. That's their definition of sentient. So from a Buddhist point of view, this just got a little more complicated. Because when they talk about the 6 classes of beings, they're talking about hell beings, hungry ghosts, and animals of the lower realm. Human beings, demigods, and gods of the higher realms are viewed as sentient if they possess a mind that is contaminated by the obstructions of delusions or their imprints. 2 of the 6 classes of beings that have any impact on our moment-to-moment Buddhist practice, though, the only ones we really ought to be looking at in that list is human beings and animals. I don't think any of us mess around too much with hungry ghosts or hell beings or demigods or gods. But we mess around a lot with other human beings and animals. So we got to make those 2 categories the focus of our Buddhist practice. Because they're the 2 classes that are actually causal factors in this reality. We interact with them. We're interdependent and interconnected with them. But also included in this definition is this line. Sentient beings are characteristically not enlightened and are thus confined to the death, rebirth, and suffering characteristics of samsara. I found that to be kind of a startling sentence. Because it's kind of saying, so only sentient beings suffer. And when enlightenment is attained, then it seems we're no longer sentient if we attain enlightenment. Now, this ideal has value in understanding the state of a bodhisattva, who remains sentient even though they reached enlightenment. Why? Because they choose to continue to feel in order to guide others to enlightenment. A good thing. So there's all kinds of ways there to look at sentience, but it basically all boils down to some way, shape, or form, a sentient creature is a living creature. Still going through, as the thing said, the birth and the death that we have in samsara. But I want you to consider something. I know a lot of people get concerned about this idea of sentience. It becomes a very big thing in their mind. But consider this. Consider the concern over what sentience is as akin to the man shot with the arrow. Remember the parable of the arrow? So this is the guy who refused medical help until he knew all about what and who shot him. So consider sentience like that. Think of sentience as the arrow, and a skillful redescription of living being, or thing, if you will, as the medicine. So we're going to go from sentience to living being. And there's no ambiguity that way. A living thing is a living thing. Doesn't matter how it thinks, doesn't matter how it feels. It's a living thing. So in Buddhism, we could call the ideal, if it breathes, it leads. Because all living beings deserve to be respected and honored. Buddhists around the world make use of all manner of things, and each of them, animal and plant, are living things, if not beings. So, the local butcher and the organic kale grower, the horse that pulls a carriage around the park, and the praying mantis that's living in your honeysuckle vines, the paramecium and the moose. All should be respected and honored because they are part of this world we inhabit. We are interdependent and we are interconnected with all living beings. In the Pana Sutra, the Buddha offers 4 ways of answering questions. And the 4th one is that certain questions should be put aside or answered with silence. He offered, quote, "He knows what's worthwhile and what's not. Proficient in recognizing both, he rejects the worthless, grasps the worthwhile," unquote. We have to say, sentience is not worthless. It's not a worthless concept. It's just a confusing ideal that can be cleared up by choosing a more worthwhile, a more appropriate view and language. Here's what I'd like you to try. The next time you encounter the words sentient or sentience in your practice, replace them with the words living being or living thing. Be mindful of the transformation of the worldview that will gradually occur. This will transform how you think and it will transform how you act. Because the idea is just honor all life. Don't worry whether it's sentient or not. Set that aside. That's a category that we honestly don't need to worry about. Because, again, if we are respecting and honoring all living things, then we've got everything covered, right? We don't have to be concerned about how they think or how they act. We only have to worry about how we think and how we act. Question. Oh, I should ring the bell first.